Number 1. Okay, so I'm on my phone. Please forgive my mistakes in structuring of this. Okay, so when I was 17, I was always in Yahoo chat rooms. I was always chatting with people in the local Seattle rooms. Well, this one guy and I chatted a lot and decided to meet. We met at Herfy's for lunch. When he showed up, it was very obvious that he'd lied about everything. His age, what he looked like. The guy even admitted he'd lied about having a job, and he showed up to Herfy's on the bus. So after we eat, I say, "It was nice. I have to go." And as I walk away, this guy starts following me. I walked to the burger joint because I didn't live very far, and I didn't want this guy to follow me home. My mum was a flight attendant and was out of town. My mum had a week left until her days off from flying, so I really did not want this weirdo knowing where I live. I start telling this guy I had some appointments to take care of, trying to shake him from following me, but he insisted it was okay and he would just go with me to be company. Not knowing what else to do, I stopped at the bus stop and waited for the bus for downtown Seattle. He stopped too and got on the freaking bus with me. The whole ride he kept trying to talk to me by asking me all sorts of questions. I would answer with the bare minimum and fill in with lies because I didn't want him to know things about me. At one point he tried putting his arm around me and I just leaned away, so he tried putting his hand on my thigh, and I told him I don't know him well enough for him to touch me. I felt sick to my stomach the whole bus ride, trying to rack my brain with what the fuck to do once I got downtown. Once downtown, I walked over to the building where my best friend's mum worked. Since I knew the layout of the building, I could play it off. I told him I had to use the restroom. I asked the woman at the cafe there if I could use the restroom, and she agreed. Okay, let me explain this. There is a delivery service door outside. It leads to this hallway, and this hallway has doors that lead to different shops and to a service elevator to take things and merchandise to the other stores on upper levels. Okay, so I exited the cafe through the back door into the hallway and left the building out through the door next to the docking bay. I took this as a chance to make my way to a bus stop to go home. I was going to take the express bus and just get off at the airport instead of the other bus that takes forever. Well, as I make my way to the bus, I stop and see the guy at the cafe still waiting for me. I managed to make it onto the bus and never saw the guy again. However, a few nights later I was on Yahoo Chat again, when someone messages me. I told him I wanted to see a picture to know who I was talking to. He sent one. I see the picture and instantly pick up the phone and call one of my friends. The friend I call, his mum and aunt were really good friends with my mum and aunt. Our grandmothers had been close friends too, back in Eastern Washington before either of us were born. So he answers, and I start talking to him. "Hey, are you on Yahoo Chat right now?"
No, why?
"Someone is trying to talk to me and they gave me a picture of you, claiming it was them." Well, I go back to talking to the guy online and he admits it is not a picture of him. He admits who he is, and he felt we had a great connection, but he lost me when we went downtown. He started to profess his love to me and everything. I cussed the guy out and told him I lost him on purpose. Then I changed my Yahoo name and never met anyone from Yahoo chat room in person again. Creepy internet clingy guy? Let's never meet again. Number 2. I apologize in advance if this is not the clearest post you have read on this subreddit. It's all kind of fuzzy to me now, but I assure you it's 100% real. This all happened when I was about 15 years old. I was going through a pretty difficult time. I had just revealed to my parents about the sexual abuse I suffered at the age of 8 by my half-brother, who was 7 years older than me. This, coupled with the fact that I had had depressive episodes and suicidal thoughts, starting at age 11 from being bullied by my older sister for many years. I'm guessing my parents told my grandmother about what I was going through because she, in turn, told my mother about a man at church who was a psychologist. She thought it would be a good idea for me to talk everything out with a nice Christian man who dealt with this sort of thing. At this time in my life, I was already hinting to my mum that I wanted to speak to a therapist, so I agreed to meet him, despite feeling nervous. So the weekend arrived and he came over. Our introduction wasn't at all creepy. He had a friendly face, a kind smile, and was at least in his early 30s. Nothing ever indicated that he had bad intentions. He suggested we go for a ride in his car and just talk. The thought of being in a casual setting made it less intimidating to me, so I had no problem with this. I said goodbye to my mum and grandma, and we went on our way. The ride began with minor chit-chat and exchanging pleasantries. He asked if I had ever been to insert small town near my city, and I told him no, so he decided to take me there. I don't know how quickly it started, but soon enough, he was heavily complimenting my appearance, telling me that I was a very beautiful girl, and talking about how cute I was. At first, I thought he was just being a nice guy, and didn't think it was too sinister, and as such I blushed and said thank you in response. I wasn't very used to compliments. My feelings changed, however, when he started rubbing my upper thigh. Being a victim of sexual abuse, this immediately made me uncomfortable, and I knew this was becoming inappropriate. We talked about school and what I wanted to be when I grew up, my interests, etc., and he made sure to let me know how intelligent and mature I was. Thinking about it now, it was definitely grooming behavior. What made it worse was he was driving way too fast. I'm talking 20 miles over the speed limit. I was feeling increasingly unsafe, and wished I had not asked to be put in a situation like this. All I wanted to do was go home. He eventually took me to a Robin's Donuts in the small town. He bought me an ice cap. While I drank it, his eyes never left me. I mostly kept my eyes down, or basically anywhere else besides him. He asked me if he could see me again, and not wanting to create an uncomfortable situation, I lied and said yes. After I finished my drink, he took me to a nearby dock and held my hand. Alarm bells were ringing in my head, and all I wanted was for this nightmare to end. Eventually, he decided we should head home, so back in the car we went. Cue more ridiculous speeding and thigh rubbing. Thankfully, he never went too high. When we got back to my house, I couldn't get inside fast enough. I was so relieved to be away from him. He went to go talk to my grandmother. Apparently they were quite close, and I overheard him talking about her meeting with me again sometime. I shuddered at the thought. Then finally, he went to say goodbye to me, and I smiled my fakest smile and bid him adieu. When he was gone, I agonized about whether or not I should tell someone about what happened. I didn't tell my grandmother because she obviously loved him as if he was her child, and I didn't want to ruin her image of him. I entertained the idea of just sucking it up and seeing him, because I was finally talking to a therapist like I always wanted. But I just couldn't. I couldn't be stuck in a cramped space with him again, and I was worried that it would escalate. So the next day, I asked my mum to meet me in the basement because I had to urgently tell her something. Once there, I really didn't know how to explain what I felt. I just told her that I didn't want to see him again because he acted as if I was his girlfriend. My mum instantly understood what I meant and told me that she'd talk to Grandma about it. Later that night I heard her telling my grandma that I'd prefer talking to a woman instead. Grandma was kind of confused about this, but didn't argue. I'm happy to tell you guys that I never saw that creep again. I honestly don't know what ever became of him, or if he ever asked about me. I just hoped that he didn't end up preying on someone else. Number 3. Several years ago, I was working in retail as an assistant manager at a very popular men's and women's clothing store in a large, upscale shopping mall. Most of the time, I had opening shifts, and I came in very early to open the store alone, or occasionally with one other sales associate. I would sometimes get creeped out being in such a large store all alone, but the introvert in me preferred the quiet, slow morning shifts on weekends, before the whirlwind of crazed afternoon shoppers. We communicated over headsets in the store, and one Friday morning, my sales associate, Kate, called out over the headset, "You have a phone call." She explained that it was a customer I had helped earlier that morning, who really liked the items I had sold him and wanted to thank me for the exceptional customer service. It hadn't been much busier than usual that morning, and I didn't remember selling anything in particular to a male customer. I figured Kate misunderstood him, or maybe he was thinking of someone else. Either way, he asked for me by name, and I was delighted to take a phone call from a satisfied customer as opposed to an angry one. I walked over to the registers and picked up the phone at the desk. "Hi, how can I help you?"
Is this Ashley?
A man's voice asked. "Yes, this is Ashley. How can I help you?"
Ashley with the red sweater and dark hair?
"That's me," I replied. Thanks, Mum and Dad, for cursing me with an ultra-popular 80s baby name. People have to triple-check that they're talking to the right girl,
Oh, I'm so glad I got a hold of you, Ashley.
said the man on the line. Something about his voice was setting off tiny alarm bells somewhere in the back of my head. "I'm sorry, who is this?" I asked.
Oh, this is Mark.
He replied.
I just wanted to say thanks for helping me pick out that shirt earlier.
I started racking my brain as he prattled on about how much he liked his outfit. Definitely didn't remember a Mark with a shirt. I glanced down at the caller ID. Unknown.
And you're so friendly and beautiful.
Oh, Jesus, guy. Asking me out under the guise of a customer service call? I rolled my eyes and looked over at Kate, annoyed. She smiled, waiting for the little bit of customer gossip that would surely come her way after I hung up. "Thanks for the compliment, sir, but I have to get back to—" He cut me off.
You know you have a perfect arse. I thought about it the whole way home. I jerked off thinking about it as soon as I walked in the door.
Mark proceeded to go into sickening detail about all the things he wanted to do to me. I didn't need to hear any more. I slammed the receiver down, feeling sick. After telling Kate what had transpired over the phone, I continued to go over the day's events in my mind. I definitely didn't remember anyone named Mark, but I was selling 100 shirts to 100 different guys every week. Mark could be any of them. Mark might not even be his real name. Soon enough, customer traffic picked up in the store, and more of my co-workers filtered in for their shifts. I told my manager and a few co-workers about what happened on the phone that morning. Although I was thoroughly disgusted by it, they helped me shrug it off. Just a one-off weirdo customer who would probably be too embarrassed to ever come into the store again. By the end of the day, I had forgotten about Mark. Unfortunately, the phone calls didn't stop. Mark continued to call the store several times a week. He would give different names or start out with some made-up customer service issue, changing his voice at first to ensure he got me on the line. Sometimes he'd make perverted sexual threats. Sometimes he'd be clearly jerking off. Sometimes he'd say nothing at all. He always called from a private number. Generally, as soon as I realized it was him, I'd hang up the phone and go about my business. It wasn't until the third or fourth phone call that it dawned on me he wasn't harassing me from the comfort of his own home. He always seemed to know what I was wearing. That green dress, those black boots, your ponytail. He was watching me. He was calling me when I was working alone, or when I was the only person behind the desk to get the phone. My co-workers confirmed that no one was calling for me when I was off duty. He could see me. During that epiphany phone call, I looked around the store. There were a few men in the store, but none of them were on their cell phone. I looked out the big front windows of the store into the mall. Plenty of people were milling about out there, but no one seemed suspicious. I had a creepy feeling that stuck with me for the rest of the day after that. I was only 21 or so at the time, and pretty naive. I'd grown up in a very sheltered upper middle class bubble. Aside from an errant catcall or occasional creeper at the bar, nothing like this had ever happened to me. I didn't know what to do. After a few hours of being unable to shake my feeling of unease, I called mall security to tell them what was going on. They said there wasn't much they could do, but offered to have someone walk me to my car after my shift. The officer they sent up to the store was hardly bigger than my 5'7", 115-pound frame, and he was armed with a flashlight. I politely declined the escort. I don't know why, but after a short series of increasingly threatening and disturbing phone calls, one day Mark just stopped calling. I had taken a few precautions in that time. I made sure I scheduled a male co-worker to open the store with me, and always walked to my car with another person at the end of the day. I don't know what happened to Mark. Maybe he found a different target. Maybe, hopefully, he dropped dead. It actually creeps me out even more now than it did back then. How did he find out my name? Was he coming into the store, or just watching from outside? Did I ever interact with him in person? Retrospectively, I was really dumb for thinking that a person who was stalking me over the phone and had already located himself very near to me wouldn't take it any further than making phone calls. I'm glad he didn't follow through on any of his creepy plans to assault me. But still, let's not meet Mark. I'll give you the kick in the teeth you deserved back in 2008. Number 4. This was removed by an auto-moderator before for wall of text infractions. I've gone back through and tried to space it out a bit more, so hopefully it stays up this time. I hope this is the correct sub. I sure as hell found it creepy when it happened, and 15 years later, I still do. This story happened a long time ago, maybe 14 or 15 years ago. I'm a bit fuzzy on the dates. I'd have to go back through news articles to make sure, but I think it was 2001 or 2002. I was 11 or 12 years old at the time and living in a tiny town in the Florida Panhandle called Cantonment, just outside Pensacola, Florida. I lived across the cul-de-sac from and went to school with a boy named Derek King. Derek also had a younger brother, but I can't remember his name at the moment. Derek and I obviously knew each other. He and his brother lived on and off with his father in the house across the street. I believe they were shuffled back and forth between the parents a bit. He was also in a couple of my classes in middle school, and we played baseball together in the same little league. So we were friendly. I always liked Derek. He was gargacious and really funny. He was also a bit of a troublemaker. Well, more than a bit. He was always cutting up in school and being sent to the dean's office for being too loud in classes or doing something or another to draw attention to himself. It was always fairly minor stuff, but the sheer quantity of his antics meant that the teachers all kept him on a pretty short leash. From what I can remember, his younger brother was much more quiet and reserved, not a troublemaker at all. Derek had always been loud and brash, and in and out of detention or the dean's office. I know some people at school thought he was weird, but who wasn't at that age? We were 11 or 12, and everyone's a bit of an idiot when they're that young. But I admit, I liked him. He was really funny, and if you can make me laugh, I'll be your friend, or at least friendly with you. We were never close, but we chatted in class and we played ball together, and always got along pretty well. Never had any problems with him. I had been in school with Derek for a couple of years while we were in middle school. We had a few classes together, and he had been in and out of his dad's place for a while. That was right across the street from my house, so I saw him quite a bit and was pretty familiar with his antics and sense of humor. He had a reputation, but I always considered him pretty harmless, and quite a bit of fun. Around the middle, I think, of 7th grade, possibly 8th. Like I said, I'm a bit fuzzy on the dates. His behavior started to get a little weirder and less funny though. Example, all the boys in school had a rumor that one of the teachers used to be a porn star. Total bullshit rumor, but she was the hottest teacher at the school, and preteen boys will hang on to a rumor like that because it gets a lot of mileage. I think most of us knew it was bullshit, but it was fun, so it propagated like crazy throughout the school, and we enjoyed the hell out of it. Anyway, one day in this teacher's class, Derek raised his hand and straight up asked if she was a porn star. Obviously, he got in trouble. But it was more than that. I personally saw him using the eraser of his pencils to rub burns into his arms. Not just random burns, like smiley faces and stuff like that. Weird stuff. He also got into trouble at one point for using a teacher's stapler to put staples into his thighs and arms in class. Just weird stuff that threw up some red flags. But you know, we're all morons at that age, and we all just figured he wanted some attention, which he probably did. Shortly after these incidences, Derek's house caught on fire. And not like a small fire, but basically raging inferno. I wasn't around to see the house in flames, but because I lived right there, I did see the aftermath. It was pretty bad. When the firefighters got the flames out and went through the wreckage, they found Derek's father's body. It was a mess, but it was determined the fire hadn't been the cause of his death. He had been brutally beaten in the head, his body, and the house had been soaked in gasoline, and the fire had been set intentionally to cover the murder. Derek and his brother were not in the house and were nowhere to be found. This caused quite a manhunt for the missing boys. At this point, no one was sure what happened. Had they been kidnapped by the murderer? Had they murdered their father and set the fire themselves? Had one of them done it and taken the other? No one knew what was going on. Derek and his brother were missing for a while. I want to say about a week, but it may have been less. And the entire time, pretty much the whole community was in a panic, looking for them, trying to figure it all out. Keep in mind, this is a very small, pretty rural town. Everyone knows everyone, and the community really came together to try and find the brothers. Some time went by, and eventually Derek and his brother turned themselves into the police and admitted that they had beaten their father to death with a baseball bat and had started the fire to cover it up. After the murder and fire, they had gone into hiding with a family friend. And this is really twisted. The family friend was a local cop named Chavis. The cop knew what they had done because they had told him about it. He allowed them to hide out in his home. Not only that, but he began a sexual relationship with the younger brother, who at the time I believe was 11. Fucking disgusting. After a while, Chavis persuaded them to turn themselves into the police. Obviously he wanted them to leave out his complicity and the fact that he was a pedophile rapist, but it all came out in the wash. To make a very long and complicated story short, the King brothers were tried and convicted as adults of the murder of their father, as well as arson. Chavis the cop was tried and convicted as an accessory after the fact, destruction of evidence, perjury, rape, pedophilia, and a host of other things. And all three were packed off to prison. It turns out Mr. King, their murdered father, was a raging alcoholic, possibly a hard drug abuser, and abused the boys horribly, physically and mentally, and apparently kept them in living conditions that would be unacceptable for prisoners, which is, I guess, why the boys killed him. I heard recently that the brothers had been released from prison, and that Derek was attempting to live a normal life in a different state. I even heard he was in college. I don't know if any of that is true, but I hope it is. I certainly don't condone their actions. Murder is unthinkable to me. The capital crime, as they say. But apparently their father was a monster, and they were children, truly children, both 12 or younger when this occurred. They will always have to live with what they've done, but if they do have a chance to live free lives again, I hope they take advantage of it and do some good with their lives. Maybe that's wrong of me. I don't know. But I sympathize with them. I can't imagine how terrible their childhoods must have been with a monster parent, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, and then adult prison whilst children. As for Chavis the cop, he will spend the rest of his life rotting in prison. So, I lived across the street from, and went to school with, and played sports with a couple of murderers and their monster father. I don't know if Derek will ever read this. Odds are probably against that, but Reddit is huge, and this is a pretty popular sub, so you never know. On the off chance that you are reading this, Derek, I don't ever want to meet you again, but I do wish you and your brother the best. I hope you can have semblance of a normal life, because you still have quite a lot of it left to live. And if you work at it, I think maybe you can atone for your sins. If you want proof this story is true, all you have to do is Google King Brothers murder. It made it to national and international news. There were books written about it. It was on all the major television news networks and newspapers. It's very easy to find. I'll try to attach some articles from the Pensacola News Journal, the local paper around our hometown, if I can find them. If I can't, just Google it. You won't have any issue certifying this story's authenticity. This all happened a long time ago, so I may be off by a year on the dates or the ages of the brothers, but I believe all the meat of the story is accurate and exactly how I remember it. Edit. I have done my best to present this story in a sympathetic way. The truth is, I do feel bad for the King brothers. While I don't condone their actions, I can't say that at their age, and given all the incredibly horrible things they have gone through at the hands of their father and other adults, that I wouldn't have acted in a similarly tragic and violent way. I repeat again, I liked Derek. And while I didn't know his brother in more than a passing acquaintance sort of way, I liked him too. They were bright kids and always friendly. They have served their sentences and are currently out of prison. I am happy about this. I don't think that children that age should spend their entire lives in custody for mistakes they made before they were old enough to truly grasp the full implications and repercussions of their actions. Again, I wish both brothers the absolute best of luck. I hope they have long, successful, and fulfilling lives and are able to live them reasonably normally and in peace. Number 5. Hi everyone. I've been lurking for quite some time and love reading the stories here. The reason I'm sharing my story is because my great aunt passed away a few weeks ago, and now that I'm rethinking my memories of her, I'm beginning to realize the fuck-upness of it all. Please excuse some spelling or grammar mistakes. English is not my first language. Background. I am a 20-year-old female. My great aunt was 88 when she passed away. I'm not related to my great aunt by blood. She was my maternal grandmother's brother's wife. They were quite wealthy. He used to be a well-known lawyer, and she had a rich family, and they lived in a large house near one of the capital's old canals. They never had any children. This was part due to their workaholic lifestyles and their love for traveling, but I think there were also some fertility issues, because she always wanted her nieces and nephews to come visit them. My great-uncle had been in feeble health for years after a couple of intracranial hemorrhages following his retirement, which left him quickly tired and a very slow speaker. He was still the most intelligent person I've ever met. When he eventually died, my aunt became even more clingy, always wanting us to visit her. The story. My aunt lived about 2 hours away from us, which may not seem like a lot, but it was still the other side of the country for us. I guess a little bit of research will tell you which country I mean. Capital with 2 old canals. 2-hour drive from border to border. Hint: Western Europe. So with my parents being busy with work, and my siblings, male and female, both now 17, and me being young and not very interested in visiting our older relatives at the time, we didn't see our aunt that often. When we did visit, probably once every 2 months or so, boy was she happy. It always made me feel a bit guilty, but it's not like she didn't have a large social circle. She was quite the socialite. Her own family was old money. She would spoil us children, although we teenagers had to fake our enthusiasm when being gifted jigsaw puzzles and antique books on German grammar. We did not speak German very well. She would have her cook make elaborate meals, and truth be told, it was always delicious. After dinner we would all have tea and biscuits in her living room, talking and talking. That and that friend would have cancer again. She had the nicest gallery opening last week. How are we doing at school? Would I go to university in her city? Typical rich old people talk, I guess. My aunt was a little obsessed with her tea. Her teas would always have these exotic, insanely sweet flavors, and had to be tasted to analyze thoroughly. Old people antics. No biggie. She was eccentric. If she didn't have money, she would have been called crazy. But rich people are eccentric. We didn't realize the pattern in what would happen next. But now I look back on it, I can see it. After dinner and tea time, we would get very tired. Not knocked out tired, but drowsy nonetheless. Most of the time my father would still drive us home in the evening. Very dangerous in hindsight. But sometimes we had to spend the night at my aunt's. It made us even more hesitant to come visit her. But she would call and whine about how lonely she was. We thought our sleepiness was caused by her talking and wanting to know everything about us. She was an emotional leech. If we could spend the night, she was ecstatic and would prepare breakfast in bed for us and try to get us to stay for the rest of the day. I remember one time when I was about 14 or 15 that my brother became very ill when we were there. We had to spend the night because my father had a decent amount of wine and my mother was just too tired to drive. We had breakfast, again accompanied by my aunt's tea, and went to visit a museum with her while my parents slept in a bit. While watching a painting by our country's greatest painter in the main hall, my brother threw up all over the security fence in front of the painting. I'm talking projectile vomiting. It barely missed the huge painting, and we were quickly escorted to the bathroom by a panicked security guard. My brother looked awful, pale as a ghost, throwing up every few minutes, his vomit becoming clear and a little bloody. The guard suggested she'd call an ambulance, but my aunt refused and took us home. It was a 10-minute walk, and my brother threw up 2 times in the canals, under loud applause from a few drunken British tourists. A 12-year-old boy, lads. So we came home, and my parents were obviously very worried. We were all feeling a little bit nauseous, so they suggested taking my brother to a doctor. Again my aunt refused, putting him in her bed and drowning him in blankets with hot water bottles. She said something like, "Oh, maybe you should stay for a few days for him to get better." But my parents put us in the car and we drove home. When we got home, my brother was already feeling a lot better, so he didn't see a doctor after all. Now the time when I finally realized something was wrong. About 2 years ago, when I visited my aunt for a few days before Christmas, I had just had my tonsils removed, and it hurt as hell. All was fine when we arrived. The usual talking and eating. I didn't eat a lot because swallowing was particularly impossible. My aunt insisted I drink some tea, but I couldn't drink anything hot, so I kept telling her no thank you. That evening, I stayed remarkably clear. Despite my pain meds, I could, however, see my family becoming a bit drowsy. They spoke slower and a bit incoherently. and complained about being tired at about 10 p.m. I thought that was weird, especially since I remained so clear. I chalked it up to me being on edge because of the hunger and not participating in the dull conversations because of the pain I was in. It's only now that I think, if only I had said something. When my aunt died, my scattered family had a little get-together after the funeral to remember her and sharing stories. The being tired and staying over scenario was told quite a bit by my uncle and his wife, my cousin and my parents. Everyone became a bit uncomfortable, but we thought nothing of it, because hey, she was dead. You couldn't just say something like that. Right now, I'm almost 100% sure there was something in the tea. The only time I didn't become sleepy was when I didn't drink her tea, although she kept insisting throughout the evening. I guess she wanted to keep us with her, close to her, after her husband died. I did a bit of research these past few days, and I'm pretty sure it's some kind of coping or escaping mechanism, something like Munchausen's by proxy. I don't really bring it up because she's dead, and I don't even know how to bring up such an unbelievable accusation. It makes me both sad and angry. Sad because she was obviously lonely and wanted to be close to her family, but also angry because she took enormous risks and could have ended very badly. My brother, the children getting the same spiked tea as the adults. Obviously she's dead, so I can't say let's not meet. But I think it was a scary situation nonetheless. Hey guys, Flamingo Creepy here. I thought for Easter I would give you 5 creepy Reddit stories. If you liked that video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, as I do release videos every Monday. If you want more videos but are impatient, there are 5 videos before this one. I would like to thank the Reddit users who gave me their permission to narrate their experiences. The links for those will be in the description, along with the news link for the 4th story. If you have any creepy encounters you would like me to narrate on this channel, you can email them to me or send them to my Facebook page. Those details will also be in the description. If you send me a story, please write a brief statement saying that I have your permission to share it with this beautiful creepy community. Keep an eye on my Facebook, as I do post daily about creepy things, whether they are urban legends, missing people, or serial killers. Remember, the monster isn't under your bed, it is in the street. And as always, be safe, my creepers.